Hello, you're all very, very welcome to the weekly Armchair Sports Talk YouTube channel. This is the Talk of the League podcast, and I'm joined by three guests today. Shaun Connolly, Manchester United fan, Sean Moroney, Chelsea fan, and obviously Tereak Talks, Arsenal fan. You can see by the shirt he's wearing as well. I think Sean might have his Chelsea jersey on as well, does he? Yeah, good man. So, bit of a hiatus there 2 weekends ago, obviously from the passing of the Queen. The Premier League just took the decision to postpone that weekend's fixtures, and then three fixtures were also postponed just the previous weekend as well due to policing issues. Obviously, there was a lot of policing that would have had to go on in and around the London games as well, I suppose. So, but there was still a good bit of football on the weekend, and we're going to, as per usual, fly through the results over the weekend. If my phone would hurry up and allow me to get stuck into it. So we 4 games. We actually had 2 games on the Friday this week, didn't we? So yeah. 2 games on Friday. Aston Villa 1, Southampton 0. Massive pressure release valve for Steven Gerrard. You could tell when the referee blew the final whistle, the stress that just left his body after that win. He was probably the manager under the most pressure since the start of the season. Was he going to keep his job? They had a tough couple of games coming up, and if they did lose to a team like Southampton, you would have thought that his time would have been up. They would have pulled the trigger on him, to be honest with you. And we're going to talk about the managers after I do the results that are under a bit of pressure, but I think Gerrard might be safe for up until the World Cup anyway. Nottingham Forest 2, Fulham 3. What a game of football this was on a Friday night. Forest were 1-0 up, and then Fulham scored 3 goals in 4.5 minutes to take a 3-1 lead. Forest got a late goal to kind of put a bit of pressure on Fulham towards the end. But Fulham, another win for them. Really, really good start to the season for Fulham, back in the top flight. 3 games down on the Saturday. Manchester City 3, Wolves 0. Game it actually had the credentials to be a bit of a decent game. Wolves kind of were putting it up to them. They were kind of attacking down the flanks as well. Neto was dangerous for them as well. But obviously, the game was kind of ruined a little bit with the red card from Nathan Collins. It was one of those, really, wasn't it? He kind of committed himself to it, and then the clash came, and it looked a lot worse than I think it was. But I don't think the referee had any choice other than to show him the red card, to be fair. 3-0 for Manchester City, another goal for Haaland, and they look like just they're steamrolling towards the title again this year, lads, which we're going to touch on now shortly as well. Brighton and Crystal Palace was postponed. Newcastle 1, Bournemouth 1. Disappointing result for Newcastle, I think. I think they're the type of games, if they want to be taken seriously for European football, they're the type of games they should be winning at home. I know Bournemouth have kind of turned the corner defensively anyway since they sacked their manager Scott Parker, and Gary O'Neill has come in and kind of shored them up. Listen, if we're going to lose, make sure we don't lose by 9 goals like we did to Liverpool. And then the evening fixture that day was Tottenham 6, Leicester 2. The last 20 minutes of this game was the Heung-min Son show, to be fair. Hadn't scored all season, came on off the bench 25 minutes to go and scored 3 goals. Massive for him, and a friend of mine had him actually captained in his fantasy Premier League team, so he was delighted to see him come off the bench and score 3 goals for him. And then the final 2 games on the Sunday, Brentford 0, Arsenal 3, which I'm sure Tereak is delighted about, and we're going to touch on that game as well. Everton 1, West Ham 0, finally a result for Everton, which Lampard as well did the same as Gerrard. Big kind of cheer at the end of the game. The pressure is off now going into the international break. So I want to touch on the 2 managers who were under pressure, especially after those results over the weekend. David Moyes and Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers, to me, lads, looks a beaten man. He looks like he's basically just waiting on the owners to pull the trigger. Sean, I'll come to you first on this one. What's your opinion on Brendan Rodgers as a whole, as a manager? Do you think he's the right man for the job? Is it a case that Leicester City aren't? It's one of those, isn't it? Like last season they were doing so well, and then I think it might have something to do with the whole Asian market going and the owners not wanting to spend money selling their best players, and Brendan Rodgers' hands are tied. What is your opinion on Brendan Rodgers at Leicester at the moment?
Well, I suppose if you're looking at Brendan Rodgers, I think there's I think there's always been quite a bit of huff and puff about Brendan Rodgers, to be perfectly honest with you. He is held in the media as an individual who has these capabilities to be able to lead teams far beyond their capabilities, when ultimately, for me, he's just been a guy who's flattered to deceive when he's had the opportunity to be able to actually deliver something. All you have to do is go back a few years when he was at Liverpool. He had an opportunity to complete something, and he saw his opportunity dwindle away when really and truly it shouldn't have. Go back and look at Leicester 12 months ago. Leicester had an opportunity to build and to start climbing into European football. Ultimately, they were the catalyst for their own downfall. And now you look at a situation where they've got 1 point from 7, isn't it? And it's really a double barrel sort of thing, because it's obviously the statistical side of the points is brutal. It's absolutely brutal. It's beyond relegation form. It's some of the worst form I've ever seen. But it's what's happening on the pitch is really and truly where you have to worry, because obviously they have investors who haven't put massive funds into the club, but there's still a strong fulcrum in that team. And it's very, very capable to achieve mid-table, slightly higher if needs be, because there's some quality footballers still at that club. So for me, fundamentally, I'm not a Leicester supporter. I don't look week in, week out at what's going on, but I would think that there has to be a residing issue inside in the dressing room. Not necessarily it's all Rodgers' fault. I think that fundamentally there's a problem in the dressing room, which ultimately is not helping Rodgers. There's clearly some footballers there that aren't happy with what's happening. I think there's maybe some of them that had an eye on the exit door this summer and it didn't come to fruition. I'd be looking at Youri Tielemans for that. And I would think that Youri Tielemans probably thought he was on the way out, maybe to Arsenal, in terms of what reports were saying. But there's something fundamentally wrong there. Do I think Rodgers is the man to be able to bring them out of it? I don't. No, in no way, shape or form. I think that change is likely sooner rather than later, because in all honesty, you're seeing them get worse and worse and worse. I know James Maddison had spoken after the game, and he said that someone, if they weren't watching the game, is going to look at the result and say, oh yeah, Leicester have been hammered again. But ultimately, you can say that as much as you want. You were hammered. You did concede 6 goals. And like Son come off the bench, that's a fella who's absolutely drained of confidence. And I think that is the perfect example as to where Leicester are at this moment in time. You have a guy that is so lacking confidence, has not found the net all season, is after being dropped and can come off the bench and score a hat-trick. And not only that, he scored 2 from outside the box, 1 with either foot. And it's obvious what he's going to do, and yet they still let it happen. And fundamentally, I think that spells Leicester's season to date. And if change doesn't happen, I can only see it going one way.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I don't think it's necessarily all Brendan Rodgers' fault, because, like you said, 2 seasons ago, even last season, they had a decent enough season. FA Cup win 2 seasons ago, I think it was. I think Keane said it there in the comments. He hasn't really necessarily been backed. I mean, to lose a player like Fofana, who's potentially been given a platform there, get, what was it, 75, 80 million in, and then bring in a Belgian centre-back from the Belgian league, I believe. He's not replacing quality with quality. He's kind of just filling the holes, if that makes sense. What was glaring for me was the fact that Kasper Schmeichel just left out of nowhere for €1 million. The captain of the club, kind of the person who always came out and spoke in defence of the team and the manager on occasions last season. And he literally it was like a Tuesday morning, we all woke up and he was gone to Nice for €1 million. That was a glaring thing for me as well. They brought in players like Iniacho a couple of seasons ago. They brought in Dake, who they probably thought would replace Vardy's goals when he did eventually hit that decline, and they haven't come to fruition yet either. I don't know what the situation is with Leicester, because if Leicester do sack Brendan Rodgers, they aren't necessarily going to be able to replace him with a top manager. Like, I don't see Pochettino going in there. I think Leicester are probably in a situation where they were up there challenging for Europe. Now they're kind of coming down a little bit, and they're going to need a manager to come in and kind of work with the players that are there. Now, do you talk about players like, managers like Sean Dyche? He's been itching to probably get back into management. Would Leicester be that initial step up from Burnley for him? And also, would he be the right manager to kind of take Leicester forward with the players that he has, shore them up defensively? Because, like you say, like, that game was it 2-2, the Leicester and Spurs game at one stage in that game, and then they fell apart in the last 20 minutes.
I believe it was 2-1. Yeah.
Yeah. So like they're not necessarily like we're going to come on to West Ham and David Moyes now, and you touched on it as well, Sean. They've 1 point out of possible 21. They're playing terribly, and the 1 point is reflecting on how they're playing. Then you come over to West Ham, and I'm going to go to Tereak on this one. West Ham, in my opinion, on the games that I've seen in this season, are actually playing very, very well in spots, but they're just not getting over the line. Like the Nottingham Forest game where they were beaten 1-0, they should have won that game 7 or 8-1. Against Everton yesterday, you would probably say West Ham were the better team in terms of creating chances. They hit the post. Begovic had to pull off a great save towards the end. So I think in West Ham's situation where they're on 4 points, and Moyes is under pressure because they have that expectation in European football and all that, and it's just not working. It's not clicking for them yet. But I think West Ham are in a situation where it will click for them and they will score goals. Tereak, in terms of Moyes and Rodgers being under pressure here now, do you think, because I was actually watching a West Ham stream earlier on, do you think Moyes is under massive pressure and he could potentially be sacked before the World Cup comes around?
What could possibly save David Moyes for me is how far they do in Europe. That's a key factor for West Ham. And even at points last season, they were a much better side. They were even knocking on the door of Champions League places towards the December part. But that European run, if he can maintain that, which he has done pretty well in Europe so far, as you'd expect with teams that he's coming up against, with how West Ham play, I think it's difficult, because this is why managers tend to have a short time and short spell in football now, because there's so much data analysis, there's so much information that other coaches and other teams can get. You can get pretty worked out in different ways, and when you do have that continuity at West Ham, for example, building your teams off of a Jared Bowen, building your teams around an Antonio, if they're not quite at the level at those points, it can be, I feel like other teams are understanding on how to sort them out and how to defend against them and not allow space in behind against a team like West Ham. And then other key threat is from set pieces and scoring in those situations. And I think defensively for West Ham, they've been pretty unfortunate with their injuries as well. Naya Fajerd, their new signing, they had at one point earlier on in the season, they had one fit centre-back. Their fullbacks haven't quite been at it as well. And with how important fullbacks are to West Ham, with their wing-back formation that they'd like to play, and when they do play a throw at the back, if you're not quite at the level in this Premier League, anyone can beat you. We've seen Bournemouth, who everyone thought, easy. Everyone's going to beat, any decent side's going to play them and beat them easily. Gone on a few run games now, undefeated, aren't they? So it is about those fine margins. And I think Europe can save him, whereas Brendan Rodgers doesn't have that. And just a quick touch on Brendan Rodgers, I think he's one of those managers that has a shelf life. When we talk about, your Contes and your Mourinhos that can do something for a certain period and then they decide to leave or they get sacked for whatever reason, Brendan Rodgers is that guy. From what we've seen at Liverpool, he had he's had the similarities between Leicester and Liverpool, because they were fluid going forward. They were a threat when they was in their peak, but defensively they always looked a bit suspect and susceptible to conceding goals. And when you're not quite at it, in going forward, the defense seems to get worse and more goals are being conceded. Like against Spurs, I didn't think they were awful throughout that first half. I thought they were the better team, just coming up against real good quality, and then they capitulated. And at that top level, if you're not quite at it, those fine margins will make the difference. So I think David Moyes will be all right, as you said, Matt, and he will go through a patch of the season where they'll go on a run of games, get their players back fit and have some continuity. And the Europe will save him as well.
Yeah, I think the difference as well for David, the difference in pressure, I suppose, on the flip side is that people are probably saying that Rodgers hasn't been backed, but David Moyes has been backed. They spent 170 million this summer, West Ham, on players and recruitment as well. So I think they were probably building for that 60-game season that they're potentially going to have, because they're going to go far in the conference, I think, anyway. And potentially that might be the only way they're going to get back into Europe next season if they win that. So, like you say, they might put all their eggs into one basket, in the European basket. But again, that's a dangerous game to play. Chelsea, Sean, let's get stuck over to you, because the last time I was talking to you, Thomas Tuchel was your manager, and now you have Harry Potter in charge. So let me know your feelings on it. I think I seen a couple of your tweets when Tuchel was sacked after the Zagreb game, wasn't it? And I think I seen a couple of your tweets kind of saying, "What is this club doing?" All this kind of. Now, this is probably before Potter was kind of in the running to be the manager. So I don't. You can give me your own opinions on that. First of all, give us your opinion on Tuchel being sacked, and then your hopes, I suppose, for Potter, if even you have any hope.
Yeah, so yeah, you would have seen my tweets. Actually, I didn't delete them or anything. They're still there. Obviously, Chelsea fans were fairly attached to Tuchel, what he'd done with the club, Champions League, just I think the biggest kind of thing with Tuchel is how he dealt with the media. I just think attracted a lot of the fans, and they really liked it. Listen to him, like you never get tired of listening to him. When the club sacked him, obviously it was a shock. It was very soon. Obviously things weren't going right on the field. You could see that he'd lost some of the players, but just to come out of the blue like it did, like there was no reports or anything. I was sitting here working from home and the phone lit up and it was a club statement. Like it came straight from there. There was no reporting beforehand. Not one big journalist got it. So yeah, I was really upset with the sacking. Didn't want him to go. He's my favourite manager. And any manager apart from, in my opinion, Pep Klopp, was a downgrade once he goes. Obviously Conte is a very good manager as well, but like I'd still prefer Tuchel.
He's been there before as well, I suppose.
Yeah, like that. Like kind of it's the bridges that burned with him at Chelsea. But yeah, just I knew it was going to be a downgrade, and I was really upset. But upon like reflecting, like given a week or two, kind of get to take it all in when you've seen what's happened. Obviously, it's not just one-sided. The owners have a lot to be blamed for as well. But a lot has come out like kind of about the dressing room, the board, and just it's like I think of it in a kind of business sense. Like if you take over a new business and you have someone running the business for you, and both of you don't see the same way, you don't have the same plan. Obviously, it's not going to work. Like it's gonna separate. Same thing with Chelsea. So like basically, Tuchel just didn't see the same way that the Chelsea owners did. They wanted the long term plan. They wanted to bring in director of football and everything, which they are doing now. So yeah, when I take everything into perspective, think about Potter, I'm just optimistic, and yeah, I'm happy with it now the way it's going. We're finally getting director of football in, finally getting good recruitment. So hopefully it'll all come together. He's under a lot of pressure now, Todd Bowley, to get this right. And so far, I'm happy enough with what's happening. But obviously, it has to happen on the field as well. Just because Potter came from Brighton or that he's an up-and-coming manager doesn't change the fact that I think Chelsea's squad is more than good enough to be finishing top four. And I think anything below top four finish is still a failure. Even if we've sacked the manager after 6 games, even if Arsenal and Spurs have been looking very good, United actually have been looking good too. I just think top four finish is a must still, even if we're rebuilding, even if we're taking a new direction at the club. That's to see things going forward with Potter.
You took you said it yourself there, a new direction. This is kind of the first time Chelsea have probably looked downwards in terms of recruiting a manager rather than kind of looking across for European talent. Obviously the likes of Mourinho, Conte, Tuchel as well, all came from big teams to come to manage Chelsea. Obviously, like they spent a lot of money to get Potter in as well. They spent 63 million on Cucurella, who is probably looking, going, didn't expect to see you here. But do you think, in terms of, are you happy with the way Chelsea have gone to a team like Brighton and looked and saying this could be potentially our manager for the next 6, 7, 8 years potentially, instead of just like recruiting for the here and now? And on the flip side of that, do you think this could potentially be the right move for Potter, or could it be a step too far?
No, I'm really happy with the way Chelsea have gone about it, because it's just like there was other managers there. I didn't want Poch, but obviously he's the big name. He would have been the big name, like you said, we went for previously. With Potter, like straight away they went in and he was the number one choice. Didn't change, went straight for him. That's why I'm happy. with the appointment, if we had gone for Poch and didn't get him and then got Potter, I wouldn't be as happy. But the fact he was first choice, got him in. The director of football that's coming in now, he was the first choice going in to get him. Like, they have a good like set plan and they know what they're doing. In terms of Potter, I think he will be good enough, and I'm optimistic. But for him, not taking into account, like, as a Chelsea fan, I think when he took it, I thought he was very silly. It's not the fact that it's a big club. I think he's good enough to manage a big club, and he's a great manager. He's going to have a great future. But like you've seen with all the managers previously, Chelsea is a bit of a poison chalice. Now, I do think Bowley, in that, giving him the 5-year contract, the way they're going, I think they want to change that and they want to stick to a long-term plan. But at the end of the day, like, he's a very smart businessman, Bowley. He makes a lot of money. He's very successful. If it's going bad, he's obviously not going to give him time at a club like Chelsea. He'll get the bullet too, and it's just the way it is at Chelsea, I suppose. So I think it's a bit of a risk for Potter. No matter what comes out publicly, what way it looks like Bowley is going to run the club or want to go long term, I think it's just Chelsea's all a big risk for our managers.
But
Sean, like you say, but sorry, go ahead, Tereak.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms, how do you think, if let's say you don't finish in the top 4 this season, do you think Todd Boehly would be thinking, contemplating on sacking Graham Potter, if that was the case?
When he was appointed, I would have thought that was the case, but Matt Law came out with a big article on the Telegraph. Well, not just Matt Law, 3 or 4 journalists came out and said that this year he's been given sort of a free pass for top 4. That's why I kind of touched on a few minutes ago that I think it should be the minimum expectation for the club, because the squad there is still very good. But supposedly they've told him that if he doesn't get top 4, he won't be sacked and he'll be given time. But they still expect him to finish top 4. But yeah, basically he's been given assurances that he'll still be there next year if he doesn't get top 4. But I'm just kind of afraid, I guess, that if the expectations start to lower like that at a club like Chelsea, it's only a bad thing. That's my only issue with it.
Yeah, it's what I was going to touch on as well, because I would think, I know it's very difficult as a football supporter to look at your club, especially a club that's perennially been so successful as Chelsea has been for nearly 2 decades now. But to look at who is coming in, I mean, he alone strikes me with concern. If I'm a football fan of Chelsea Football Club, Todd Boehly terrifies me, because he just looks like Woodward 2.0. You're talking about a guy who's, after coming into the football club, he's assumed position of football director himself via getting rid of Czech and getting rid of other backroom figures that are necessary for a football club to run. You're talking about a football club that has brought in Romelu Lukaku and allowed him to go back on loan to the club that they paid 100 million quid for him. Everything just seems to be an absolute shambles. You're talking about this guy coming out, and I mean, he's supposed to be a silent individual in the background that's allowing the football club to run. Yet he's coming out and talking about how in a North versus South, All-Star game is the route to where we can make more money. He's talking about Chelsea's youth academy and referencing Mo Salah and Kevin De Bruyne. And to me, it is a very worrying time if you're a Chelsea fan. And I'm speaking completely sort of impartial. I'm doing my best to try to analyze it as best as I can. You do have a good squad. Obviously, there's a good squad because there's been millions and millions and millions of pounds spent on that team. But if you look at it right now, the only real authentic number 9 there is Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who was rooted out of Arsenal because of an attitude problem, shifted to Barcelona, has been there less than a year and is now back, and he's the man who's going to catapult you into this sort of stardom. I just don't see it. And there's been a failed plot with Kai Havertz and trying to play him in a false 9. That hasn't worked. Raheem Sterling has come in. He's looked fantastic, and fair play to him. He's going to get goals. But Raheem Sterling is a guy who couldn't cut the mustard at Manchester City, and they look to move him on. So for me, I'm looking at Chelsea Football Club right now, and Graham Potter is a tremendous, tremendous manager. He's done wonders in everything that he's done. This is a job that was the wrong job at the right time, because ultimately it's a job he couldn't say no to. He needs to have aspirations to be able to compete at the very, very highest level. He wants to be able to represent himself in Europe, and he's got a team that he feels, if I can do it with Cucurella and I can do it with these guys and I can turn them in like Maupai and all them and I can turn them into world beaters, then why can't I do it here? But ultimately, I think there's a different dynamic, especially when you've got 30-odd-year-old Thiago Silva inside in the dressing room. And can he come to that? Can he get to that fold? And can he take this group of prima donnas that are accustomed to massive, massive pay packets and driving Bugattis and turn them into the sort of team that he wants? I don't know. And it's very good and well for Matt Laws and everybody else to write articles saying you have a free pass. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, and if they miss top four and they miss the money that they're going to get from playing in Premier Champions League football, Bowley won't be long in scratching his head and kind of changing his mind. I'd be very, very, very cautious about that right now.
The only issue with it that I have as well, it seems to be a very scattergun effect, and Sean touched on it there, bringing Aubameyang in. He brought Aubameyang in for Tuchel, and then he sacked Tuchel about a day after Aubameyang arrived.
And got rid of Gilmore for Tuchel.
Got rid of Gilmore as well.
So wanted Gilmore in the first place.
Yeah.
The only issue we have with Bowley over the summer, like out of all the points you touched on there, like I am actually happy with him. The only thing that I completely disagree with what he done is what he just said there is sack Tuchel 6 days after a window. Like the whole plan, everything, like I'm actually happy enough with that, and I think he gets too much stick and everyone's on his back the last couple of days with the North and South thing. It was just him throwing up ideas like do you reckon that Bowley didn't want Tuchel from the start? Yeah, he didn't, but the fans loved him too much, so he couldn't sack him when he came in. Like usually when a takeover like that happens, you come in, you change everything straight away. Obviously fans aren't happy because Tuchel is one of the top 4 or 5 managers in the world. But I just don't think he sacked him when he came in straight away because of what the fans would have done. Obviously he's taken an opportunity after the Zagreb results to do it then. But yeah, I just think the whole thing of the summer window and then sacking him afterwards is wrong. That's my biggest issue with him. Obviously him being sporting director over the summer wasn't ideal. But he took over the club in May. Marina and Bruce Buck went. I don't know the full detail behind that, but there's a lot of legal issues. The fact that she was Abramovich's personal assistant for over 20 years. I'm fairly sure that they had to go with the old regime. Czech left himself on his own accord because of that. And basically the reason Tuchel was so happy with Chelsea is because of Czech and Marina. And the three of those together work really well. Tuchel likes being left coaching and just doing his job. Doesn't like when Bowley came in, Tuchel basically had 2 jobs. He was like a director of football and wasn't happy. You can see it in his press conferences. When Arsenal beat us 4-0 in USA, he was really unhappy after that. He stated that how can he do any better when he's the same players, and basically having a dig at them. So look, I completely get why Tuchel was unhappy there. I like with Bowley and everything, but yeah, I just think he couldn't sack him straight away because of that, because of the fans, and then Marina and that leaving. I just don't know. Like I could be wrong, but I just don't think that it's possible to come in at the start of June with all the board leaving and to bring in a sporting director in time and get the business that you need done in the summer window. I just don't think it was possible. Now people might disagree with that, but I just think it was the only kind of route that they had. Like, because obviously he was the sporting director, but like I doubt a man with that much money and that much success in business is doing everything on his own. He surely has a team with him over the summer, analysts, the whole lot. Like, I just don't see what
he seems to have a bit of arrogance about him, like you say, coming over, giving these interviews and talking about a North and South game and talking about an academy. And I think Carragher touched on it, saying don't come in and start throwing your weight around and talking about a league that you haven't a clue about. Like, but anyway, what I want to touch on, we'll walk past all the seconds and all the kind of stuff, and I want to touch on all of our teams start to the season. I'll stick with you, Sean, Chelsea Sean, for the time being. Chelsea started the season 8 goals scored, 9 goals conceded, which is a worry. Obviously he's haven't had a game over the last 2 weekends, isn't it? Due to the what happened. I suppose you're the only one out of all of us who's kind of in the middle of. He's had 2 managers so far this season. He's haven't really been happy with like a new regime coming in as well. How would you rate your season so far? Obviously sitting on 10 points as well, but you are 8 points off the pace at the moment.
So far, maybe a 3 out of 10. I know, like, this is me personally. I thought the Chelsea team was good enough to finish at least like a minimum of third. Should be finishing outside third place. Start the season now, kind of rival fans or like other podcasts, other shows doing their predictions. Like a lot of people had Chelsea down to 6th because of the change and obviously losing Rudiger and everything. which is understandable. But yeah, I just think the squad there is still good enough to be getting at least third. It's a very good squad, and like it's obviously, like I said, I think some of the Tuchel lost some of the squad, and some of them that I don't actually like and I don't want at the club have clearly turned on him when he was there, and performances were shocking. Some of the attacking players that wanted to leave. That is actually a criticism I do have of Bowley. I think some of those players should have been left leave, not to be asking for so much money for them. The likes of Ziyech, Pulisic, and they should have been gone. And I think ultimately it cost Tuchel his job. But yeah, I'm just going to go to 3 out of 10 because the performances have been fairly poor. We've pulled a few results out of the hat, but it just hasn't been good enough at all.
That's fair. I kind of probably agree with you as well. I think Chelsea, everyone before the season kicked off, everyone was kind of saying it's Man City, Liverpool, and obviously that hasn't worked out that way in terms of Liverpool at the moment. Man City are still up there, and obviously we have the emergence of Tottenham and Arsenal. I want to come to United, Sean, first, Tereak, because I want to lead into you talking about the North London charge. So United, Sean, obviously we talked a couple of weeks ago, like yourself, we talked about a couple of weeks ago about Manchester United turning the corner. 2 games, the first 2 games of the season were beaten. He's gone on a bit of a run now. Defeat in the Europa League to Sociedad, wasn't it 1-0?
Yeah.
Which kind of burst the bubble a little bit. But in terms of the league, you must be happy with the turnaround.
Oh yeah. Like, take the opening 2 games of the season and we shipped 6 goals, and it wasn't necessarily just the nature of shipping 6 goals. It was the performance. It was a continuation of what we saw for about 25 games, continuing on from last season, and it was incredibly worrying. But a lot of people really overlooked the one fundamental change that Ten Hag made after Brentford. Was he started the season employing or deploying a structure that had Christian Eriksen sitting deepest of the midfield 3, and he had Scott McTominay a little bit more advanced. Now, McTominay doesn't have the greatest array of passing skills, and Christian Eriksen isn't necessarily the most physically imposing footballer. And that was massively taken advantage of by both Brighton and Brentford, because it was easy to physically overwhelm Christian Eriksen in that defensive role. All that he has done since Brentford is swapped Eriksen and McTominay. And he's allowed McTominay impose that physicality in front of the defence and gives Eriksen a little bit more of a free role. And what that has done has obviously taken both of those players to a whole new level. We knew Eriksen was good. I've been speaking about Eriksen for 12 months and in talking about how much I would love to get him at the end of the season. We got him. I was delighted. I've wrote articles about how I wanted him prior to him actually signing. So he's a perfect midfield playmaker. And Scott McTominay looks reborn, obviously, because a lot of what McTominay would have had to do previously when he was playing in that pivot with Fred, there was a lot more focus on his passing. And ultimately, we struggled as a result of such. Now he's got a scenario where he's got this avenue to be able to release the ball to Eriksen, and Eriksen does the passing. So McTominay's game has flourished as a result of this. You're looking at a side that's after bringing in Casemiro, one of the greatest midfielders in the world. Now, in fairness, he looks a little bit off the pace in terms of what he's been doing since he's come onto the football field. He needs a little bit more application, obviously, in training to build fitness back up and obviously get used to the game in England, because it's a lot more fast-paced than what he's used to. But United have gone from shipping 6 goals in the opening 2 games and looking like a team that's lost to a team that already has an identity of Ten Hag. I'm not saying it's there, and I'm not saying we're the finished article by any stretch of the imagination, but it's night and day from game week 2 to game week 7. Or game week 7 was game week 6, I say. And we've gone from scoring 1, shipping 6, to leveling out the goal difference, winning 4 in the trot, and beating 2 of our biggest rivals in the process. I mean, you're looking at that Liverpool game. I mean, I know Jimmy Carragher and so might be a little bit upset talking about ball possession and not creation of opportunities, but it was a perfect game plan that was very, very good. And we could have won by another 2 goals. We had 2 opportunities to score that we should have scored. You look at that Arsenal game, I could have been watching that game a decade ago. It's the exact same game that would have been played when Wenger was in his pomp. Attractive football, really, really easy on the eye, loads of possession, and ultimately hit on a counter-attack, because that's what Manchester United have done to Arsenal since the early decades, since the early 2000s. It's something that I've watched and repeat, and I don't say that with any disrespect to you, Tereak. But it's
we could see you really hurt Tereak with that comment. You could see him wincing at it.
and the thing is, because any true knowledgeable gunner is obviously looking at Mikel Arteta right now and saying this guy is doing something. He's replicating what Arsene Wenger did in all those years when Arsenal were looking for something more. And I suppose not focusing on Arsenal, I'm focusing on United now. But the fact is, yeah, I'm very happy with the way the season has turned around. A little bit agitated that we've had such a break in the Premier League because it might kill momentum in some way, shape or form, especially when our next game is against City. So we could have done with a little bit something easier than that, coming back after a hiatus for a couple of weeks. But yeah, the season has turned around and we're in a good place now. I wouldn't worry so much about that Europa League loss to Real Sociedad either, because basically that was an entire group of players that hadn't been playing. Some of them was their first minutes all season, so it's going to take a little bit of time for continuity and structure to get in there. But certainly it's looking a lot better now than it was after the second game week.
100%, because I was looking after the first two games, Brighton and Brentford. You kind of said to yourself, well, you maybe say 4 points, like going away to Brentford early on in the season might be a tough game or whatever. And then looking forward then to the fixtures, Liverpool and Arsenal, who went off to a flyer, were saying, it's just like, this is going to be really, really difficult. United could be really, really in the mud. But I said it last year, Tereak will back me up on this, I said it the year before, United's problem all last season where they were a team of individuals. Yeah. They weren't playing together. They were hiding in corners. They were hiding behind each other. They were hiding behind the manager's name, getting the manager sacked before they were even taking blame themselves. But now, since Ten Hag has come in, he's been the only one to stand up to the likes of Ronaldo and Maguire. And maybe even if it isn't Maguire, it's probably people saying, well, you can't drop Maguire because he's the club captain and we paid 80 million for him. And he's probably been the first man to come around and say, he's not good enough. He's dropped. We have Varane, who's won 7 bleeding Champions Leagues, a World Cup winner. He's playing ahead of Maguire. And we have a new fella who we just spent 45 million on from Ajax to come in to partner him. And he's done that. He's dropped Luke Shaw. Malassia's come in. And they're playing for each other. Every tackle that goes in, they're high-fiving each other. They're hugging each other. They're playing for each other. And I think that might actually be one of the biggest changes in terms of grinding out results, because I wouldn't necessarily, like, obviously the wins against Arsenal and Liverpool were fantastic wins. The wins against Southampton and Leicester weren't necessarily great performances, but they won the games. They did what they had to do.
12 months ago, we're losing. You know,
exactly.
I mean, if you go back 12 months ago, we lose that game to Southampton without question. You know, and
exactly.
There's a difference in mentality there. But something you've touched on as well with the players coming in that have that quality. Look at what I said about McTominay. Look at Diogo Dalot. Look at Marcus Rashford. Now, I know Rashford hasn't been necessarily scintillating in his form, but his output and his contributions to games is huge. His goal contributions are tremendous so far. You're looking at Scott McTominay. He looks like a man reborn, and he's rightfully keeping Casemiro on the bench. You look at Diogo Dalot. He's outperforming João Cancelo in so many metrics for a fullback. Like, he is breeding confidence into players that were previously down, and he's bringing in the right type of footballer to complement it. And it certainly looks good.
Would I be right in saying, though, as well, I think I touched on it a few weeks ago as well, that dropping Ronaldo and moving kind of Rashford in more central where I think he wants to play, is utilising his biggest strength, and that is getting in behind and using his pace. Because how many times have we seen Rashford break the lines on a counter-attack and seem like he's 20 yards ahead of the centre-half, running in on the keeper and scoring a goal, whereas when Ronaldo was playing through the middle, Rashford was playing off the left and he was running down blind alleys. He wasn't tracking back defending and all that kind of stuff. He's playing to Rashford's strengths, and I think that was the main turnaround, because 3 years ago Rashford was doing that for United and he was one of the best up-and-coming talents. He was the next big thing for Manchester United, and obviously since Ronaldo came in, he's been moved aside. Rashford, or even Sancho's been pushed over further as well, and I don't think we've seen the best from Sancho. But enough about United. Right, let's move on to Arsenal. Tereak, you've been sitting patiently there. You got a few daggers shown at you there from Sean, United Sean. But you have to be. The reason why Tereak keeps popping up all over the place is because Arsenal are doing so well. He's on everybody's channel. You can't get his face off the screen. But listen, I think Arsenal have been, in a strange way, probably everybody's kind of surprise package to how well they're actually doing. I don't think anybody dealt with the fact that they had a good team. Arteta was doing a good job with them, but I don't think anybody kind of predicted that they'd be ahead of Manchester City, so far ahead of Liverpool and stuff like that, Tereak. So, in your opinion, obviously, I know you're going to turn around and say, and probably an 8 or 9 out of 10 start to the season. Obviously, the game against Manchester United was a disappointment, but it was always going to be a tough game. So, tell us how you feel after the first kind of mini start to the season, and obviously sitting top of the table.
I can't realistically, I can't really ask for much better in terms of how we've actually performed in games as well. A lot of managers have said it. I think that we have been the best performing team in certain games. Like yesterday, that was for. I've not seen an Arsenal performance away from home like that for years. And when I say years, I don't even mean 5 years. I mean previous to that, to dominate a side that is a strong side in Brentford, who are well informed. Their star striker's just been called up for England. He's a handful. He's been a handful for how many defenders in the Premier League this season, and control an atmosphere like that away from home. It's as close to perfect and you're going to get an away performance in a single game. And even at points like against Crystal Palace, where we were great for the first 20 minutes, like we was relentless. But then we had a few periods where we struggled, and then we had to dig in a little bit and fight. And you seen Ødegaard, who's our creative player, our captain, our talisman in that sense, coming back and doing a lot of defensive work, even when he's not having a great game himself. This is all the fundamentals that you get from this, what Arteta's been trying to build for a long time, which he couldn't get through to Aubameyang, unfortunately, Ozil, even Guendouzi, just to have your attitude on and off the pitch. And you can see it in an abundance. Like there was period yesterday where Gabriel Jesus was pressing by himself. He's ridiculous. And even against Manchester United in the game that we lost, we saw Gabriel Jesus, where Arsenal was struggling to get the ball through midfield at points. Ramsdale goes long. Jesus is working off of both Varane and Martinez, and he gives us an outlet. He's basically a hold-up striker in a 5'9" body. He's really good, man. And we have, and the difference to what we have last season, at points last season, when we had our first 11, we were scintillating. We played really good stuff from that February period throughout March. But when injuries came, and it wasn't even a lot, it was just injuries to certain players, our performance level dropped massively. This season, we've had quite a few injuries. Even yesterday, missing Ødegaard, missing Zinchenko, missing Emil Smith-Rowe. And looking at on our bench, we're bringing on a 15-year-old. We have missed those types of players, but this season, we've been able to plow forward and plow through. Once again, it's been a roller coaster in the last few years at Arsenal. But I want to give some certain praise. Matt, you'll know how much I've taken stick for this one player over the years. When Aubameyang was stripped of his captaincy, I called him to be the captain. Even Moss and my brother-in-law, who loves Granit Xhaka, said no, it shouldn't have been him. But Granit Xhaka has epitomized the change that's happened at Arsenal over the years. When the team was poor, he looked poor. He was in a position where he wasn't comfortable in, but the only reason he had to play there is because we had no one else, and he was willing to do so. He's shown that bravery and even the care when he did go and do what he did in against Crystal Palace. A person, if that's, for example, Ozil, who didn't care as much as Granit Xhaka, who was way more talented and had special ability, technical ability, but just didn't show that desire and that, that passion to do well. They don't do what they do in terms of, getting angry and getting hurt by the fans. But having that transition and being a key figure, and why people were questioning, why is Granit Xhaka still here? Why didn't we sell him to Roma for 12 million? We need to get an upgrade on him, etc., etc. But he's epitomized that growth, and he's moved into a position where he was excellent yesterday. And he has been for the past 12 to 18 months, to be honest. Apart from a few moments like against Manchester City, where he gave that penalty away. And that's it. That's the one that I can really think of. But every player has those moments. I'm sure Sean, watching Manchester United this season, he'll see Lisandro Martinez give up a few, a penalty or a red card, because that's just how he plays. And that's what you're going to get from these types of players. McTominay, he'll do the same thing, etc. But you have to take the good with the bad, the rough with the smooth. And if you're going to lose a game in the way that you are against Manchester United, that's the way to lose it, where you're trying to go for the win, maybe showing a little bit of naivety where we needed to settle down the game, because all I wanted from Arsenal then was to go in front. If we would have went in front, I think it would have been difficult for Manchester United in terms of how the stage that they're at. Eventually, Ten Hag spoken about it. He says, this is, Arsenal, that how they're playing now. That's what I want us to get to, where we're dominating teams, where we're playing in their half, and we've got our fullbacks coming inside, playing out wide, being very high up the pitch. So yeah, it's been amazing just to watch all those fundamentals. William Saliba not training for 10 days, had one training session throughout 10 days, coming in and having a performance like that. Gabriel carrying an injury, having a performance like that against a tough front line. And there's adversity in there, and we're overcoming that in the moment. And hopefully that carries on. If we can keep certain players fit, like Thomas Partey, who we missed against Manchester United in progressing the ball through the lines, through the central area. And you saw him yesterday when he had 3 players right on top of him. He's able to play through that and not be naive, because he's got that experience. He's had that. And we need to make sure we keep our spine of the team consistent and fit. That's going to be a big test. Jesus is a part of that now. As I said, Partey, Xhaka is a part of it as well. And losing a player like Ødegaard last season, or if an opposition side marks him out of a game and he's not being able to be effective going forward, we struggled. We lacked total creativity and was very predictable. But Fabio Vieira, he wasn't excellent. He was decent, and he can still pop up and, score a goal. And yeah, we've got threats, and we've got so many different ways of scoring goals now, which is, brilliant to see. And hopefully it can carry on. I don't think we're going to challenge for a title. That takes a different... Is that where you was going to go to, Matt?
I'm leading on to that now. My next question, I had it written down here, the North London charge. So I'm going to spend about 5 minutes on this, lads, right? Because 15 minutes left before we kick off, and I want to put some respect on Everton's name as well, which might take about 10 minutes because I'm about to have a rant. But all that's been said, and I want to get both Sean's opinion on Spurs and Arsenal here, but we'll come to you first, Tereak. Obviously, we'll chat about Arsenal. 18 points, top of the table going into the first international break. Obviously, some teams didn't have matches or whatever. There's a bit of a gap there in between the first 4 teams as well, in terms of 4th to 5th. I think it's 4 points, but obviously there's games in hand to be played. We spoke a few weeks ago before the Manchester United game, this is going to be their first real test, and they didn't come through that test, even though they played well. They did play well against Manchester United. It was just one of those games of 3-1 to Manchester United on the day. Can Arsenal go this season on a title charge? Because in terms of a title charge, you're probably only going to be able to lose 3, 4, max 5 games and not have many draws. You're going to have to beat the teams around you, i.e. the likes of Liverpool, possibly even nick a win against Man City in order to stay up there as well. In your opinion, Tereak, and I want to ask the same question to both Sean's as well. Do you feel Arsenal are ready to take on that challenge?
In terms of performance right now, if you're looking at that, I think you can get carried away and you can say, yes, Arsenal are good enough at their peak to compete for a title in terms of how we played, even how we lost games. Like, I've watched Manchester City under Pep Guardiola lose to Manchester United a countless amount of times in a very similar fashion. So that is how those title teams lose games as well. But what I'm still thinking of, and what I've got in the back of my mind, is we've got a squad that hasn't been in this position before. We talk a lot about, mentality, being there, and having to deal with that pressure of Manchester City, which Liverpool, when they were, 90 plus points and they still couldn't go and get that title, of managing with still the youngest squad in the league. I don't think we are capable, we are there yet to be able to do it in those big pressure moments where it will be later on towards the end of the season. Yes, we've gone through that development and that learning stage. I just don't think that we'll be able to. I don't think we'll be able to do it with Europe as well in there. And once again, I've spoken about injuries to Partey. If that happens for a period of the season, we'll lose games like we did against Manchester United, where we'll dominate, but we'll be susceptible through the centre. Jesus, if we lose him for any period, whether it's a 2-3 game spell, it depends on when that is. That could hinder us in terms of our results as well. So No, not yet. We're not there yet. I still think we're missing a couple more pieces of, just that little bit of, it's not even just stardust when I say, not necessarily in terms of individuals, but just thickening that squad a little bit more for us to get there. But yeah, you know what? The fact that you've even asked this question, Matt, from a year ago, it sounds crazy to me because we were nowhere near the title. We're not even the top 4 race a year ago at this point. So
do you think top four in it? I'll come away from the title charge then. Do you think top 4 is a must then this year?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah, it definitely is a must. When you're looking at the transition, Manchester United that both Sean's are going with Manchester United and Chelsea, we've got to capitalise on them. Liverpool, their injury, their issues aren't going to get fixed overnight because the players that are injured are injury-prone players, and that's even without the reliance on Van Dijk. Are they going to be able to do that again for over this amount of games throughout a season in this unique season itself? And it's not all perfect at Tottenham as well, even though they're not playing well. They're winning games, which is something to be praised, to give them praise for. But that can quickly change if you're not playing well. Like we saw, if you just saw the amount of, that unhappiness and anger from that loss against Sporting Lisbon, in terms of their performance, they were playing like that against Premier League sides, but they were winning. So it kind of mass over a few of that. And it's very similar, once again, linking this to Sean, is how when Ollie was winning those games where it wasn't convincing, the quality was getting them over the line, and it was kind of like a ticking time bomb. You're like, right, yeah, we're winning games, but we need to improve our performance levels because performances will play. If you play well, you will win the majority of your games in the Premier League. That's how it is. And that's why Manchester City are the league winners in 4 out of 5 times. So yeah, top 4 is the must, and the highest I'm looking at is possibly 3rd. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe even 2nd if luck goes our way.
Yeah, I'll come to Sean, Chelsea Sean, on this one as well. I want you to kind of give your opinion, both Sean's, as we're running out of time a little bit, on both Arsenal and Spurs charge this season. I think I'll give my little 2 cents. Obviously, we've spoken enough about Arsenal in terms of their squad depth, but for me, Spurs this time last year, if Spurs, I think everyone had the opinion on Spurs that if Kane or Son was injured, they were done. We seen yesterday that they were able to drop someone like Son, start Richarlison, and then bring Son on off the bench, and they have options now. I think Spurs were kind of reliant on their kind of starting 11, maybe 1 or 2 subs to get them through. Now they have that squad where they can rotate with the 5 subs as well. Kulusevski being there, like Bentancur came up with a goal as well on the weekend. They just seem to have a bit of a different threat as well. With Perisic looked like he played really well as well before he got taken off there on the hour mark for Spurs. But Chelsea, Sean, give us your opinion on both of those teams, kind of touching on what Tereak said as well. Do you think either of them have the juice, not necessarily to take the title away from City, but kind of maybe replace Liverpool in that title charge?
Yeah, so basically my opinion's changed since the start of the year. I think Arsenal could possibly get 2nd. I don't think any of the teams touch Man City, to be honest, but this year. But Arsenal are exceeding expectations completely with me. I think they've been very good. Obviously, my only issues are the ones that Tereak touched on. So Europe when that comes around, and then just injuries to key players, because Partey has been a bit injury prone, and he's so key. Like Tereak touched on there. But out of all I've seen so far this year, I think they could push City the closest. Liverpool have had their issues, and they have a lot of injury prone players there too. Spurs, obviously, like you said, they have a bit more depth this year, but my issue with Spurs, and I've said it since the summer, is I don't think they've addressed the centre-backs well enough. Romero is one of the best in the league, I think, and Dyer has been good, but that left centre-back role, I'm not convinced with Longley or Ben Davies. And then just that right wing-back, they've been playing Emerson there. I just don't think he is good enough for side challenge for top 4. I think just small issues like that could cost them. Like Conte teams, the wing backs have to be very good going forward. Like I think a lot of goals and goal contributions come from the wing backs in Conte's system, and I think just one player like Emerson not being good enough going forward can break down a lot. and that could be like the issues. Like the performance has been poor enough so far this year. I think it's just issues like that could catch Spurs out.
Yeah, United, Sean, I'll ask you the same kind of question if you have anything different to add to that as well. And also maybe if not Spurs or Arsenal, then Chelsea or United? Question mark.
Well, look, you can only beat who's in front of you. So for Arsenal to have the points that they have, it's commendable for them. But you also have to take stock in who they've played against at the same time. And realistically, and if you're just talking statistically, Arsenal have had the easiest running of any of the teams up there. I mean, they've played two of the newly promoted sides. They played a Leicester side that are absolutely shambolic. You know, they look very, very good against Brentford. You know, and Jews there because Brentford are playing very good football at the moment. But you played two of the newly promoted sides. You played Aston Villa and Leicester, who have a heap of problems themselves, obviously. And on opening day against Crystal Palace were quite fortuitous to actually come away with a 2-0 win. Anyone who watched that game, as Tereak did, will know that there's a lot of stories to be told from that game. But it is the first game of the season. So ultimately, the points are there and you can only beat who's put in front of you. But as I said, I made reference previously, I could look at Arsenal a decade ago and make a lot of similarities. The same Arsenal a decade ago, never had a problem beating all the sides below them. It was always what happened when they came to the sides in among them and slightly above them. So until Arsenal actually come against the likes of Chelsea, Liverpool, Spurs, City, those sort of teams that, Everton, why not? And until they come up against them, I'll hold judgment because I'm neither surprised or impressed. I just see an Arsenal team that I've been seeing for years. In terms of Spurs have squad depth, as you said, and goals win games. They have some of the best goal getters in the league, you know, and there's no point in saying anything other than that. Arsenal are relying, we'll say, on Jesus to predominantly link an awful
create as well,
yeah. Whereas Spurs have got a depth of it, and you made reference to Ivan Perisic. He's a fantastic addition. You've got Ryan Sessegnon, you know, you've got Bentancur, you've got Kulusevski, you've got Son, you've got Richarlison, you've got Kane. So there's loads and loads, and there is leaders within that team. So if I was picking one of the two North London sides, I'd be picking Spurs, and I'm not doing that because I have any sort of disregard for Arsenal. I'm just trying to be pragmatic with the squad that is there.
You're looking at the bigger picture over the 38 league game season.
Yeah. And in terms of a side challenging Manchester City, as much as I hate to say it, I can't see anybody challenging Manchester City. I think City are going to run away with the league this year. And I hate saying that. Trust me, more than anybody, I can't stand it. But they have a side that is built up to play a certain type of football, and they've added a robot into number 9 who just can't do anything but score. So I can't see anybody challenging them. In terms of second, third, and fourth, it's take your pick, really and truly. It's far too early for me to make an assessment. I'd like to say United are progressing in such a way that they can get in about it. Chelsea have a squad that can do so. Arsenal have a lot of points. Spurs have a big squad. So, and Liverpool will come good again. But I do think people need to realise Mane is a very, very special type of player. And losing Mane is not just as easy as clicking your fingers and saying Luis Diaz can be Mane, because he's not. So there's a lot to be said.
Right, let's move on to a real title challenging team in Everton. I think Everton 6 games unbeaten. Not many teams can say that. 4 draws, a win, and a win in the cup. I'm claiming the cup as still being a game unbeaten as well. But I have written down here, put some respect on Everton plus Lampard. Now, Tereak will know my trials and tribulations from last season, the stress. I went a bit more grey than I usually am over Everton last season as well. But I was asked on many occasions, did I think Lampard was the man to take Everton forward? And I always said, I'm not going to judge him on this season when I was talking last season. I'll judge him on next season. When he has his own squad there, he can decide which players he doesn't trust, he does trust. He can go to a director of football in Kevin Tellwell, who we brought in, and say, I need this, this, and this because I don't trust this, this, and this. And I think he's done that. I mean, I think we didn't spend, it may sound like we spent a lot of money over the summer, but we actually really didn't, because a lot of the deals are structured. Connor Cody coming in. When was the last time you seen a lone player get the captain's armband for a team? Connor Cody wore the captain's armband for Everton yesterday, who apparently he's a big Liverpool fan. He's been absolutely fantastic. I mean, the first game of the season, Ben Godfrey breaks his leg. Yerry Mina is out for 2 months. Abdoulaye Doucouré in the next game picks up an injury. If that happened to Everton this time last year, we would have been relegated 100%. But what Lampard's been able to do this year is, and Chelsea Sean might come on this as well with Lampard's time as well. He does like to kind of play that kind of back five, 3 centre halves, the wing backs on forward. But because of the injuries, he's reverted back to a back four in the last couple of games against Liverpool and West Ham, who we played yesterday. Everyone said that Cody couldn't play in the back four. Well, he's after getting the captain's armband playing in the back four with Tarkowski, Patterson, and Michaelenko. The emergence of Iwobi under Lampard has been nothing short of incredible. Tereak will be able to touch on that as well. Probably thought he's overpaid for Iwobi when he left Arsenal, and it probably has, in my opinion, taken 2 years for him to actually be worth his money. But towards the end of last season and the start of this season, he's probably been our best player. And news came out yesterday that we're negotiating a new contract for him. Bringing in players like Neil Maupay, everyone's probably scratching their heads thinking Neil Maupay, he only scores 8 to 10 to 11 goals each season. Richarlison only scored 8 or 9 goals a season. We need to realise that we are at a certain level. We're not a European team. If we can get a player that can come in and score 8 to 13 goals and also help contribute around them. Bear in mind, we played the start of the season with no strikers. Dominic Calvert-Lewin was injured. Rondon was injured. We had Anthony Gordon up front through the middle who was getting bullied by Thiago Silva for Chelsea. And I just feel as though that this time last year we had Rafa Benitez in charge. We had players that we didn't want at the club playing, earning 120 grand a week. Now we have Frank Lampard in charge. He's reconnected with the fans. He's brought the whole club together, and he's actually gotten Everton playing in a style and a way that Everton fans want to see. There was an incident yesterday. Scamacca went up and elbowed. He elbowed He elbowed just a guy in the gay in the chest, and Connor Cody and Tarkowski went over and literally took him out. Went over and pushed him, took him out. You've never seen that this time last year for an Everton team. So, Tereak, I'll come to you. Do me a favour and put a bit of respect on Everton and Lampard for me, will you?
You know what? He does deserve it, and Frank Lampard, he has been doubted by a lot of us. I'm sure. Me and Shaun Connolly, especially. I don't know about you, Shaun, because I know he's Lampard and he's your legend, but definitely has been doubted by me. I wasn't sure if he'd be able to keep them up at points last season when he came in, because he was trying to play and trying to force through his football, which we saw him try to do with Chelsea without having those types of players, the right players to do that. But he has shown that he can adapt, and he's done that again this season as well. I don't actually rate this current squad that Everton do have a lot. I think they lack a little bit of quality, especially going forward in those areas. But the fact that he's been able to get the basics and the fundamentals from the side and be able to play through the midfield and get it out to your wide areas and be very direct, you have to give massive credit. And the same reason we give credit to Eddie Howe for what he's done with Joe Linton, we have to do the same for Frank Lampard with Alex Iwobi, and finding a position for this player, knowing that, you know, he's had that work ethic, he's shown the right attitude and mentality to be at Everton, and find a position for him to get the best out of him and to also get the best out of the team is commendable, because none of us saw. I can say that, unless you did, let me know. But seeing him all be playing in central midfield, looking a very good ball progressor, being a good creator, transitioning the ball forward, is crazy. And he works very hard. He's very good on the press as well, which is what Lampard wants him to do. And with doing it with Neil Maupay up front is even more commendable. We gave Graham Potter a lot of credit for that. And Damari Gray having a man of the match performance, getting the best out of him. And, you know, Rafa Benitez, he did well with Damari Gray, but then faded off a little bit. And he's keeping the levels up high. So massive credit to Frank Lampard. And if England do decide to get rid of Gareth Southgate, because Graham Potter's gone now, I'm saying get Frank Lampard for England eventually.
No, I don't know about that now. We have to keep a hold on to him for a while. But I'll come to United.
Too much now, haven't I, Matt?
I know, yeah. I'll come to United, Sean, on this one as well. Bear in mind now the Everton squad as well. I want you to talk about Everton as a squad and Lampard as well, the job that he's been doing. In yesterday's game, the whole back line wasn't there this time last year. 2 out of the 3 midfield weren't in the Everton squad last year. And obviously our starting striker yesterday in Mopé wasn't there last year either, this time last year. There has been a massive overhaul in the squad, and they haven't necessarily spent that much money in order to do so. Cody and Tereak obviously coming in, leaders. That was the one thing that Tereak was telling you last year. We'd nobody leading there last season. Mina was a leader, but he only played 12 league games or something last year. Michael Keane is afraid of his own shadow. Holgate was probably third or fourth in the pecking order, and funny enough, until he got injured a few weeks ago, he was probably one of our better centre halves as well. So, United, Sean, what's your opinion on it? Has Lampard actually done a good job at Everton so far?
I'll be honest with you in saying I tip my hat to him tremendously for what he's done with Alex Iwobi. It's tremendous what he has done with Alex Iwobi. I actually I saw footage of one of those random shows on BT where he was speaking with Rio, and it was breaking down his analysis and how he breaks down his tactical play. But they gave a huge segmentation on it, talking about Iwobi and how he picked it up in training very, very quickly. And seemingly Iwobi has a massive influence over the dressing room. So I've never been the greatest fan of Frank Lampard as a manager. He fell into that sort of trio when Solskjaer, Lampard and Arteta all came at the same time. And he became he was impenetrable from the media, whereas Arteta and Solskjaer got pounded left, right and centre. And it really, really sort of digged into me a small bit, because of the three of them, I saw him playing the less tactical, influential football. Now, he's gone to Everton. He's had an awful lot to work with, because there's so many injuries and he's had it against him. I mean, the biggest part I would think of Everton, correct me if I'm wrong, it's having Dominic Calvert-Lewin there to be able to facilitate the forefront and the tip of the spear for that particular attack. And when he's not there, you're looking at a side that's got 5 goals so far this season. Look, he has restored a sense of pride, I believe, to the way they're playing. They seem to have a lot of fight, and they're buying in as a squad to what it is he's doing. He has brought in shrewd players. I would say that I'm a part of a contingent that looked at recruiting players from a recently relegated side and trusting them into your team and expecting them to be able to lead a sort of a resurgence. I was somewhat susceptible or maybe suspect as to how it was going on, but they look like they have a bit of bit in them. And that Merseyside derby, I know form goes out the window generally, but an incredibly entertaining game. And for Klopp to turn around at the end of the match and say, look, we had chances to win, but so did they. So a draw was probably a fair result. I think that's testament to the work that Lampard is putting in. So credit where credit is due. He's done more positive than negative so far for Everton. And when he gets his players back, it'll be quite interesting to see how he goes with it.
Yeah, the games, the Arsenal game that was called off last week was probably a blessing in disguise. Arsenal were coming off that loss to Manchester United, probably going to be a wounded animal. Probably would have been the worst time to play Arsenal, especially at the Emirates. So it probably wasn't a bad thing. Neil Maupay getting his first goal as well for Everton as well. Like you say, the focal point was missing in the first 4 or 5 games of the season. But Maupay came in against Liverpool, done a really, really good job, and probably occupied the centre halves better than what a Demarai Gray or an Alex Gordon could have done in that situation as well. Dominic Calvert-Lewin was left out of the squad yesterday, but they basically just turned around and said there's no point in risking him for this game when we have a 2-week break coming up. Putting him through a pre-match routine, maybe possibly aggravating something if he's only 90%. Give him another 2 weeks off, bring him back into the fold for the Southampton game. And Neil Maupay stepped up to the plate and got the goal for us. Sean, I'm going to come to you, Chelsea Sean, to round off the podcast. Give us your thoughts on Lampard, because you obviously had previous experience with him as a player and as a manager. Do you think he's done a good job so far, and do you think he can potentially, not like in terms of my expectations for Everton this season, and I said it from the start, my expectations for Everton this season is, first of all, to stay in the league, and then second of all, get as close to the top 10 as possible. So I'm talking like 12th, 11th, 13th. I'm not sitting here going, Lampard's bringing us to Europe. So what's your opinion on Lampard so far?
Yeah, well, last year when he came in, you were nothing short of a disaster, really, before he came in. So what he'd done last year and came in and like steadied the ship and kept you up, I think was such a good job. Like, when he came in, I was tipping he to go down. I thought you were going to go down before he came in. So that it says a lot about him that he was able to come in. And like he said, he didn't have his own players last year, and you were a bit all over the place. Some of the players that were there might have been difficult, and that, but to steady the ship and keep you up was great. This summer, like he said, he's got a few of his own players in. He's made a difference. Personally, I think the stick that he was getting at the start of the season and the summer, and like a lot of people laugh at Lampard as a manager and like take the mick in that. I think a lot of that stick should have been going towards some of the other managers in the league, the likes of Brendan Rodgers and Steven Gerrard has gotten away with a lot. The money they've spent, what they've been backed with the squads that they have, Lampard is doing a better job than any of those two so far. With what he has there, like you said, he brought in Maupay. Obviously, I've talked to you the time with Maupay and Ambrosia when we talked on Twitter. Like Maupay, like you said, he's not like a 15 to 20 goal season striker. Like Villa and that have like the likes of Danny Ings who've done it before, and Lampard doesn't have that at the moment, and he's still getting results, still pulling it together. I think the big thing about Lampard, and we noticed it with Chelsea as well, is he's very good at connecting the fans and the team, getting a good spirit there. He was brilliant with Chelsea. Obviously, being a legend at Chelsea helped him in that regard. But with Everton, he's gone straight in there, and he can notice the connection between the fans and the players, and the players are willing to die on the field for him. And like you said, with Cody not getting stuck in the other day, just stuff like that. And yeah, I think he's done a really good job with you. Been really impressed with him. Obviously, I've had my doubts with how he finished at Chelsea and going to another club. I had my doubts about him then, but he's really kind of shored them up and changed my mind about him again. I think the season before, where we had the transfer ban and he brought some of the younger players through, it reflects again with Everton, where you have players where you mightn't be expected to do well. Like we weren't expected to get top four that year, and we did. But with the transfer ban, a lot of young players coming in. I think he does really well, and he gets the most out of players that aren't expecting anything. He's really good at doing that, and like you said with Iwobi, like turning him in, like changing his position, and what he's done this year is not short of spectacular.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And United, Sean picked up on a point there as well for Dominic Calvert-Lewin coming back in, the focal point. There was a couple of chances there yesterday against West Ham where Damari Gray and Gordon were doing great work down the wings, playing the ball inside and getting the ball back outside, flashing it across the box, and there was just nobody there to kind of pounce on it. Maupay, I think Maupay should have done better twice, where he should have dived at the ball. He just kind of let it run past him. If Dominic Calvert-Lewin is there, it's a goal. It's a tap in for Calvert-Lewin. That's the reason why Calvert-Lewin, if fully fit, gets you 10 to 15 goals a season. And if we can get him back and get him fit, and the difference, I want to leave on this, the difference, in my opinion, from this season to last season was if Dominic Calvert-Lewin was injured, we were goosed. If one of our midfielders got injured, in terms of like Alan, we were in trouble. If one of our centre halves got injured, we were in trouble. If Pickford got injured, we were in trouble. Now we seem to have, I won't say adequate, but we actually have options in terms of changing formations. If Dominic Calvert-Lewin plays 60 minutes and it's not working out, take him off, bring Maupay on. You can put two up front with Maupay and DCL now as well. So this time last year we didn't have those options. This time we do have those options, and in my opinion, I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to be happy. I'll be happy as an Everton fan if I can see progress as a team and as a squad in terms of not lying down and getting beaten easily and stuff like that. Like if we can keep the clean sheets going that we are at the moment as well, and just become a team that's hard to beat, get back to what we used to be, and a team that kind of ground out performances, I'll be happy enough. And I think I'm still predicting a finish between 11th and 14th, but a comfortable finish, nothing like last season whatsoever. So that's it, lads. I think we've covered all bases. We've talked Arsenal, we've talked United, we've talked Chelsea, we've put some respect on Everton as well. I think the majority of stuff there was fairly positive towards Everton, so fair play. By the time we talk again, we could have a manager sacked. Who knows? Rodgers and Moyes could still be in a job. Lampard could be sacked after all the praise we've been giving him over the last 20 minutes. Who knows? You never know.
Maybe Potter and Sean.
Yeah, Potter, yeah. But listen, lads, thank you so much. United Sean, give us a shout out to what your YouTube channel, if you have any sort of shows coming up, let us know now.
No, I've no YouTube channel. But I can't do regular contributions with Stretty News and with Stretty Cast. So you can get those on Twitter at Stretty News and at Stretty Cast. We get regular podcasts out there about Manchester United, and Stretty News is one of the number one fan-rated blogs and online. And obviously my own Twitter is there. So if you fancy knocking heads with me, I'm all there. Not a bother.
And Chelsea, Sean, the same to you. Where can we find you?
Yeah. So it's just on Twitter. You can see my Twitter handle underneath there. Obviously a member of the Weekly Armchair, so I don't need to shout out any shows we're on it here. But just Twitter. Below there you see my handle. That's me then.
Oh man, and Tereak again. Where can we find you?
You can find me Tereak Talks on YouTube. What we've got coming up is Premier League prediction show. I'm going to come back with the, predicting the whole table now during this international break and how it's going to be and play out in a format that the man himself up there he set out, and I want to get him on for that. But we need to speak. I'm just throwing it out there for the first
copyright
time.
And all that.
Sure. So come check that out. And on my channel, it's not just Arsenal, although there's probably a lot of Arsenal bias. But so just talking all things football. And Sean, not Man United, Sean. Yeah, when we beat Spurs, I'll be finding you on Twitter, man. Don't worry.
No, it's Tereak's show is be good. The Premier League prediction show that he does with Ed is very good. I think it's got about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours sometimes as well. Goes through all the fixtures. Yes, it depends what's going on. Very, very good. They talk about all the fixtures coming up and they give you stats and stuff like that. So very, very interesting to watch. So that's basically it for this week. Probably won't be a show next week. The fact that it's in the middle of an international break, and this is the Talking League podcast, so we'll probably be back in 2 weeks' time, unless something mental happens and we have to talk about it during the week. But guys, thank you so much to the panel. Thank you so much to everybody that was in the comments as well, contributing with questions. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel as well. Make sure you like and follow everybody here on the panel as well. Diamonds and Buckets podcast is coming up as well on this channel, and the wrestling podcast with Reese is coming up as well on this channel, and then the usual Riff Raff United podcast that happen on this channel also as well during the week. I'm sure Kane will be promoting them as well out on all the socials and stuff like that. I have to kind of just take it away from United for a few times, you know what I mean? Just promote all the other teams. But thank you so much to everybody, Arsenal fan, Chelsea fan, United fan, Everton fans. We're going to try and get as many different teams on again throughout the whole season. But enjoy your international break, guys, and we'll see you again soon. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Cheers, lads.